Okay, so this is John from Red Dice Diaries, and I'm here talking with another one of my favourite people in tabletop RPGs about their version of D&D, how they got started, what version they prefer, what edition, and what they'd like to see in their ideal version of D&D, GMing, playing, stuff like that. And this episode, we're going to be talking to Mathew Bryan. Thanks for joining us, Matthew.
Hi, John. Thank you very much for the invitation. Always happy to talk to you about anything tabletop related.
Indeed. And now, you've probably got a much better memory for things like this than me, because as regular listeners will know, my memory is absolutely shocking. That epilepsy is a real killer for the memory cells, trust me. But when was it what was the first game we actually played together? Because we've gamed together online like a fair bit over the years, haven't we?
We have now, John. We have gamed together for over 10 years, believe it or not.
I can't believe it.
If my memory serves correctly, the first time we actually had a game together was not actually D&D related. It was Warhammer. It was the Enemy Within campaign.
Yeah, it was Sean Connors was running it, wasn't he?
Correct.
Yes, I remember
Jason and Ambrose, I think, may have been the other player.
Yeah, I've got a very hazy memory of it, because I remember I played a Dwarf Troll Slayer.
Initially, yes.
Yeah.
And I believe you then transitioned to playing an elf.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Whereas I played a human bounty hunter?
And ironically, I'm now actually running that very campaign myself at the moment. So,
come full circle.
Yeah, wheels within wheels. But we're not here to talk about Wolfrub, much as I would love to, because I'm always happy to talk about Warhammer and Wolfrub. Obviously, we're here to talk about D&D and your particular experiences and your sort of, if I can put the slightly flowery phrasing on it, your journey through the world of D&D, that sort of thing. So, if you don't mind me asking, what edition of D&D did you first start with?
So I'm a little bit of an odd duck in terms of the chronology of D&D over time from its inception to now.
Okay.
Because I'm one of the people who came into it when D&D as a brand, as a game, was kind of on the downturn. So I came into it when they released. Every edition has been controversial in some form or another.
Oh yeah, of course.
So that's no surprise to anyone who's been around a while on tabletop. But I actually began my D&D journey, as you said, with 4th edition.
See, that's interesting, because I know a lot of, and I sort of jokingly referred to this in my earlier sort of interview with Rob Benfer, 4th edition as like the edition that dare not speak its name, because it's something of like the red-headed stepchild of like the D&D family, really, isn't it?
Yes, it's the one that they try to move away the most from, the kind of what I guess again, this depends on your perspective, but kind of the common understanding of D&D between the people who played it from the original game. This was the edition that tried to move the furthest away from that and try and embrace a different style.
Yeah, and I mean, all joking aside, I played a fair bit of 4th edition D&D when it came out. I've got most of the books on my shelf, 4th edition. When they did they re-released, I can't remember what it's called, but they did like smaller versions of the books when they did like a sort of re-released and tied together version. I can't remember what they called it, but I never got into that. But I've got a lot of the sort of like the first books that came out for it, and I played a fair bit of it. I've never run it, but I played a fair bit of it at the time, and I thought, yeah, it's very different to traditional D&D. Yeah. It's got some great things I loved about the system. It's got some bits that I didn't like so much, but I was like, well, so's every other edition.
It's got bits and pieces.
And I never really understood the hate for it so much. I think a lot of it was just because it was very different to previous versions, but I know a lot of people criticised it and they were like, oh, it's more like a board game. There's no like role playing sort of like built into it. And I was like, well, if you boil any of the other editions down to like mechanics, there's not a lot of actual role playing in the mechanics themselves.
Well, this is one of the things, and we'll touch more upon this later on, I guess. But when you read the DMG about D&D, it covers what calls like the pillars of play.
Yes.
And you've got the combat pillar, you've got the exploration pillar, you've got the role play pillar, and these are sort of things that it talks about and how you put a campaign together and how the game goes. And 4th edition is no different in the others, in my opinion, in the sense that it puts an overwhelming focus on the combat side, the pillars of play, rather than others. So, you can you can have role play any of the editions,
Oh yeah,
but it's not
absolutely.
necessarily baked in to the mechanics
Yeah.
as much as it could be.
I mean, one of the sort of slight missteps I feel they made with fourth edition, I don't know how you feel about this, is, well, the couple of missteps. The first, I think, was when they tried to like change the Forgotten Realms as a campaign setting to fit with fourth edition, and they did like a big sort of cataclysm and it like introduced things like Dragonborn and stuff like that, which weren't a thing before, and that felt a bit weird because they were trying to sort of twist the setting to fit into a new game. I do think fourth edition suffered a little bit from not having like its own sort of, here's the big new exciting setting for fourth edition that we're going to do. Although I've got to say, one setting I think that did transition pretty well, which I know me and you are both fond of, is the Eberron setting.
Yes, yeah, I'd say overall, Eberron is my favourite of the D&D settings books. I think there's a lot potential in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've got most of like the third edition books for it. I think I've got the fourth edition, and it's one of the few sort of books where I've bothered picking up the book for fifth edition because I don't really run or play fifth edition. But like you say, I think the Eberron setting was something very new and so very exciting. I remember all the initial excitement when it first came out in third edition, and I think for some reason, I don't claim to know why, whatever edition it's put into, it seems to work pretty well.
But again, I think that's possibly because the themes of Eberron are and the kind of material that it draws from is so strong and evocative that it works regardless of the kind of mechanical framework you put it in. I think it translates well no matter which of the rule sets you're using it in, because the idea of the background, the kind of history, and the stories you can tell in it really work.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bit when it because obviously I've got like a lot of retro clones and stuff like that, and things like Shadow Dark and stuff like that. And whenever I get one of those, genuinely one of my first thoughts is like, could I run Eberron with this?
Yeah, yeah. Could you switch it out and put it
Yeah.
everyone in there? Yeah, yeah.
And for like for saying that when Eberron was originally created, if I remember correctly, it was like the winner of a competition. That was
Yes,
how it
yeah.
sort of came to be produced. For saying like, because I seem to remember reading the original competition sort of rules, and one of them was like you have to be able to fit anything that could fit in a traditional AD&D campaign. Well, sorry, D&D campaign. You have to be able to fit
Yeah.
it into this setting, but you know you can put your own spin on it. So like there's drow in it, but they're quite different. There's like other bits and pieces in it that are quite different. And I think for saying that it was supposed to be so different from like the traditional sort of D&D campaign setting, I think almost any sort of version of D&D you can fairly easily, with minimal tweaks, run an Eberron game in it, which I think is like a real like selling point of the setting to me. Because I could think like, oh, Shadow Dark, I could whip up a few house rules, I could run Eberron dead easy.
Yeah, exactly. It's the it works well. It can stand on its own if it needs to, but it works.
Yeah.
Like I say, as a fifth edition, as a D&D setting, it's one of the stronger in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that when you draw from the source material of Eberron to create your campaigns and the characters, you really get a lot out of that. You
Yeah.
create a lot of strong characters, a lot of interesting narrative opportunities or things that can happen during the game.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Keeps it fresh.
So if I can take you back to this sort of like first fourth editions of D&D game, I presume you
Of
were
course, yeah.
playing in it rather than running it.
Well, if we're going right to the start, so initially, when I first encountered the game, I learnt sort of bits and pieces from listening to the Inquisitions Incorporated podcast, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I was a big Penny Arcade fan. I still am, but not as much. I don't really pay attention as much to the PA stuff as I used to. We all have, our lives all change, things move on, but
Of course.
but yeah, that's how I initially encountered it. I listened to their podcasts and I gained an interest in fourth edition, and I eventually picked up the books.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you sort of first sort of actually?
Again, I'm a bit of a late bloomer, John. So it would have been around 2008. So I'd have been like 23.
Yeah,
Around
see
time.
that is one of the things that
Which
interests
feels
me.
like a long time ago. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Well,
talk over
no, it's all good. No. It's amazing how quickly time passes. But yeah, it's one of the things that interested me. Not the only thing, but one of the things that interests me and why I wanted to do these interviews, and I'm going to try and do them with a number of different people, is because I think everyone sort of started that journey into like and I said this when I was talking to Rob, that like, you know, like D&D is like the gateway drug into tabletop role plays for a lot of people. Like even
Yeah.
if you're not involved, like most people have heard of D&D to some degree or another, you know. So it's like the sort of,
Especially in the last decade or so, it's really become more in the public eye than it
oh
used
yeah,
to be.
especially with obviously like the rise of like nerd culture and shows like Stranger Things and stuff
Crit-
like that.
Critical Role's kind of
Of
rise
course,
from
yeah.
a Twitch stream to a global brand. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got like the animated series of based on the games now. So yeah, it's really sort of taken off. To most people are aware of it, but it interests me how, like, say, a lot of people got involved at different points. So you say you sort of started fairly late off, you know, like in your 20s. I sort of started looking at I was interested in my sort of early teens, but didn't really sort of actually take the plunge until like a few years later, because I was playing Warhammer for a bit, and then I sort of got involved in like tabletop role plays like later on. But I find it interesting how like different, like there's some people obviously were like, I came out of the womb rolling a D20 and with a copy of the first
Yeah.
edition like DMG tucked under my arm.
When I was born into this world, I rolled my first hit die.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
ever.
Yeah, there's some people who, like, you know, like maybe their parents played and introduced them very young. They played in a club at school, whatever. And some people who sort of came into the hobby later on. So it's I find that quite interesting, because it does make me wonder whether what stage of your life you get involved in tabletop role
Yeah.
playing, whether it colours your experience
It
of
can, and I
TTRPGs.
think the addition can make it can kind of color your experiences as well,
Yeah.
and the design ethos of the game itself, like kind of the inspirations behind it, have changed over time, I think.
Okay, so this first edition, so this first game of fourth edition that you played in, can you recall anything now, like all these years later, about like what took place, well, the highlights of that sort of first game that you played in, like how long it ran for, you know, what was the sort of main vibe of it?
Yeah, it was. So I played, like many people, I played one of the starter sets for fourth edition, a local gaming club,
Okay.
a bunch of random people and a friend I knew from work. Um, you have known me before, John, from when we met. Is like my sort of alias online was Rhaegar the Dragonborn. Like that was the how you knew me by before we became on first name basis
Indeed.
before we breached into real life terms. But yes, that is a reference to my first D&D character,
Oh,
which
nice.
is fourth edition. So I played a Dragonborn barbarian. That was my very first D&D character, and we played Keep on the Shadowfell,
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, with a bunch of people, and that was the first experience. So I had a kind of like I came to fourth edition with very little expectations or knowledge of the system or the setting. So I was a bit of a blank slate initially.
See, sometimes I wonder whether that's like the best way. I know it's more difficult now because everyone's sort of heard of it, like you say, like we said earlier. But I do wonder if that's one of the best ways to get into gaming, because you don't come with any sort of baggage associated with like editions or anything like that. You just sort of turn up and you're like, oh, let's see what this is about.
I do think so. I do think so. It's better for the game, I think, and it's better not to tell a new player too much
Yeah.
about how the game's meant to be, because I think that restricts how they think about it. Because as someone who came to it fresh myself when I was much younger, and I've ran games for people who've never played it before, you can tell the difference between a new player and a veteran player, how they approach things. There's some kind of pre-established understanding of how things work, and sometimes that's good, and a lot of times it can actually be counterintuitive, because they self-censor their choices in a way
Yeah, yeah.
about what they're going to do. So we can talk about the German side as we're talking about me as a player initially, but we can get into that later if you wish. But yeah, Keeper of the Shadowfell was my very first foray to fourth edition, and I remember one of the funny things about my Dragon Ball Barbarian is we discovered he was only barely more intelligent than the zombies that we were going up against. And I mean, like, I could barely understand, writing.
Right. Okay. Well, you mentioned GMing there, and obviously I know that you play in as well as GMing games. So from the moment you started playing, that very first sort of fourth edition game, how long, but roughly, was it before you were like, right, I'm going to take the plunge. I'm I'm going to run a game myself.
And it was a couple of years.
Okay.
I was in. How I ended up starting GMing is I was playing in that game for a bit until it concluded, and that's one of the things I found interesting is fourth edition Gatekeeper and the Shadowfell is in its like kind of enclosed setting. It's not really tied to any of the kind of famous D&D settings. It
Yeah.
was its own thing. So it wasn't until later on, until fifth edition, that I started to learn more about history of the game, because they were releasing with those sort of settings
Yeah.
out the gate. But yeah, we played that, and it was a couple of years, maybe two, maybe three, before I started GMing myself, which actually began because as you are more than well familiar with, John, as a veteran yourself, is some games just die.
Yeah.
Some games just start up and die.
That's how it
So
goes.
there was a fourth edition game that was being run by an experienced GM, and it got maybe two sessions in and then fell apart.
Right. Okay.
And the people that I was gaming with still really wanted to play, and they enjoyed it, and they didn't want it to end there. So I volunteered to start running a fourth edition game for them.
So, given those circumstances, you sort of like had to learn how to gem like on the quick, basically.
Yeah, I had to learn GM, but I had a lot of advantages that some other GMs don't, and I do recognize that is because one of the things that I really enjoy, and again something to consider for your podcast run, is like in the early days, like we're talking like first, second, and maybe even to third, like again this is before my time, so this is stuff that I've picked up from other people. Is that
Yeah.
there was really no internet,
No, of course.
and you had kind of your shared groups, your gaming groups in your towns and cities, but the sort of knowledge about the game was much more localized. So it was much more of a siloed experience in learning the game. And I talking to really old is maybe a bit harsh, but like people who have been around since the beginning of D&D, like their understanding of the game largely comes from those days of learning it in college or in a club or through friends before the internet was really a thing. So
Yes.
they had to learn it via that small pool of people, and kind of the house rules and the approach to the game came from in those isolated areas, which is why now in the modern day there's so much variance in the opinion of how to run and what a D&D game should be,
Yeah.
because I think it stems from that in those kind of heady mythical days where like, well, this is how we run our games back in our own time, and this is how we had fun. Like, well, for me, I had the internet, so I was able to learn it like directly from Wizards of the Coast. I was able to read about it from many different areas, and that's kind of like the advantage I had is I had a better access to resources to run it. But you're right, I had to run it pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, just to sort of like make myself seem even older than I actually am, I still remember the very first time I saw like a polyhedral dice was when I was at junior school, and a
Yeah.
one of our teachers sort of bought in some polyhedral dice just with the idea of that we were going to use them for like maths problems. You know, like you roll some random numbers,
Mhm.
you do like a maths problem with those numbers, and it was literally the first time I'd seen any dice that wasn't a d6, like you know, like in a
Oh
board
yeah,
game like Monopoly or whatever. And I remember that just sort of seeing all because they're all like you know like the sort of the gem dice, you know, like the sort of
yeah.
transparent sort of coloured dice. And I remember I was just thinking, like, oh, what are these like weird things that the teachers bought in? Whereas now, like you know, like different types of dice, it's as common as anything. But like you say, when I was in junior school, like we didn't have the internet. There was no. I was too young to be going down local game stores and stuff like that. I didn't really even know we had a local game store at the time. So when this sort of stuff was bought in, it was all sort of fresh and new and exciting to me, which I think is one benefit of not having all the sort of internet and all these resources. But as you say, you sort of like you had to learn everything through trial and error. Whereas now, I do think the internet and like blogs and podcasts and stuff like that are a great resource for anyone who wants. They don't have to go in
Mhm.
cold now, as such, like people who want to get involved in the hobby.
Very much so. Very much so. And just to share with me, John, as well, like I didn't really encounter any of the D&D dice except the D6 until I started playing 4th edition. But I was quite familiar with the D6 dice from playing a lot of Warhammer. That was one of my very
Yeah,
first forays
same.
into tabletop. You know, Eldar, Tau, and Space Wolves player for those out there who are fans. But yeah, that's how I sort of started off in tabletop, much before I encountered 4th edition. But yeah, I'm just the same. Like I had never seen a D4 or a D20 until that point.
You know what I mean? I remember sort of when I was younger, and like I say, I sort of started off with Warhammer Fantasy Battle and stuff like that. And then I remember sort of hearing a bit about D&D, but it was like in the days when, because obviously D&D was mainly like an American sort of phenomenon. At the time, we didn't have like, you couldn't go into like a bookstore and like get a D&D book like you can now or whatever. So I sort of went in via like Woofrup at the time, because I was like, oh, this is connected with Warhammer. It's something I already know.
Yeah.
It seems to be one of these like role-playing games I've heard about. That seems like more my vibe than the big sort of battle games.
Yeah,
And
there's
I sort of
definitely a
went
lot
in there.
of sort of adjacent things between them. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can slide into D&D. Absolutely.
Okay, so this, if you don't mind me asking, this first game that you GM'd, how did it go? Did it run for a while, or did it, like you say, did it fizzle out? Because games do sometimes.
Technically, it's still ongoing.
Is it?
After a decade or so, yeah, technically it is still ongoing, because people have moved away.
Of course.
Things have changed, like we're much older, but there's still a desire to finish it. We were getting close to like the third and final act of the story. What is interesting about it is that obviously I had to learn to GM. That was my first foray into GMing with 4th edition, and I based it on what I knew, which was the setting that came with Keep on the Shadowfell. So I came with that, but as time went on, the support for that dropped off because Wizards realised that 4th edition wasn't doing it for them, and they were repositioning to release a new edition, as they do many times, as they've recently done last year. So support for that dropped off. So I found myself in a position eventually where I had to start homebrewing my own stuff into it. So I started splicing my own ideas into it and taking adventures that had been published for 4th edition and either scaling them down a bit to the player's level or scaling them up. And where we left off is we were about to go. Again, I don't know how much detail you want for the podcast in terms of in terms of
go
the
for it.
homebrew
I can edit it afterwards. Go for it.
So like in a kind of, to give you a very brief context, is they had discovered. Again, this is my homebrew stuff. They discovered that there was a kind of a multiversal situation going on.
Okay.
In that the big villain of the campaign, he was called the first mortal. Actually, some guy from long time ago. They don't really know his backstory yet, but they knew he had been he'd been trying to sort of take over the world in a kind of godly ambition. As it's very generic, John. I'm sorry, but that's what we go for. It's your first game.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. They're archetypes for a reason, man.
But what was interesting and what I took inspiration from was in the background 4th edition is the Raven Queen was implied to be immortal, and replied to be originally immortal who became a god.
That's correct, yeah.
And one of the players was playing a cleric of the Raven Queen, so I sort of focus on that's going to be one of the key sort of supporters for this campaign, like in terms of the players, like that's going to be a key person. So what the Raven Queen had done is they had, using their manipulation in sort of time, space, had created a tapestry of parallel worlds, parallel instances, trying to find one where people come out on top.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of the story is the player who's playing the Raven Queen character was in that one, which was the one doing the best. They found out that there was all these other variations that were being killed off and pruned, if you want to take for the Marvel, by the villain. And I tied every character's backstory and things to the main villain in some form to tie it all together.
Okay.
But what my homebrew thing is in defense of what's been going on, is the pantheon in this world had to try and save their followers and conserve their kind of godly energy. Is they had pulled back their forces, their paladins, their clerics into their own realms.
Okay.
Which has been done and actually I found out later on actually has been done in a few books and other settings where the kind of gods have disappeared, which is I think Kryn did it.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about Dragonlance, guys. So it wasn't copyrighted. It was just me winging it. But yeah, they pulled it back, and what the villain had done is he had created this kind of prison outside of time space to capture all these paladins, clerics. Again, this is very my first game, Joe, and he had imprisoned them in there to like siphon their energy and to sort of take from the gods, so he could like
so sort of deny them their worshippers and also power himself up.
Yeah, weaken them.
Yeah.
And part of the one of those things, the players had found out about this prison, and they were attempting to. I'm circling back to my point about the
Yeah,
adventure
that's
where
all
we went,
good.
is that they discovered about this prison, and they were going to try to do a kind of a jailbreak, kind of get them out of there to balance things out a bit more, to switch the scales around. But they had found that there was an entrance to this prison that had been hidden um, by a demi-lich, which was involved in this whole story. Again, this is all the homebrew stuff. So I had taken one of the big villains from the D&D that I'd known about in the reading the books, which was, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, is Asarak,
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah,
because he was the patron of one of the players as the warlock. So you see, I tied it all in
yeah. Nice.
with the players, and he didn't know that for at least half of the game. That's what he gets for leaving his backstory to me. But yeah, so like that was how I tied it in. And Asarak had a lot of famous stories and locations about him, so I used that because I wanted to show them some classic D&D adventures.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I say classic, it's obviously my entrance to D&D was 4th edition, so to me, 4th edition is the go-to at that point. So where we got to is we were going to go through the Tomb of Horrors, which is what he had built, and some things had been changed around because obviously I'd started homebrewing it, and it was like they were trying to find an entrance to the prison through the Tomb of Horrors.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense? That's
Yeah,
that's
that's
a circled back round. Is I was using that because that was a high level adventure that so I'm going to use that for this purpose. But yeah, that was my GMing. I didn't use a published setting for quite. I didn't use like one of the classic published settings for quite a while. I have run multiple games by this point.
So you say that like technically that game's still going on. So did it stay 4th edition throughout?
No, it actually did transition to 5th edition eventually. Yes, but I still kept the adventures and the plan to be consistent with the story. So the conversion to 5th edition isn't too bad.
So if you don't mind me asking, what was it that eventually prompted you to make the transition to 5th edition? Was it just because it was the new edition? Was it because the support was waning for 4th edition? What was it?
What it ended up being is I was playing in some 5th edition. When 5th edition came out, I eventually got the opportunity to play in some games, and I really enjoyed it as a player.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how I would do as a GM in that game. It was very different. To me, it was very different from 4th edition.
Of course,
but I know talking to a lot of other people over the years that to them it's very similar to 1st and 2nd and 3rd edition. Like in a way, to them it's more familiar than it was to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously from the sort of like Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, after 4th edition didn't go down well, they obviously tried to step back to something which was more familiar to sort of D&D fans.
Yeah. So how it played out is I proposed during a break in the normal campaign if they wanted to try 5th edition, the same players who I ran a 4th game for, because they were interested in playing it and I was interested in it, so it seemed fair. So we made characters and I ran a game, and again this was a complete homebrew for me because this game was just for me to learn how to GM it, to see how it fared. So it was just I went for a very different style to how I GM the other game as well, to see how that would play out. So before in the game, my original game, it's a lot of first game tropes. Like I made the players like the central part of the story. Like I tied everything tightly around them, which obviously is double-edged sword because if one of them dies, then like how do you then deal with the fallout for a major character death?
Of course, yeah.
Whereas in the second game, 5th edition, I essentially set it into a fantasy city, and they were part of a organization, essentially a mercenary group.
Okay.
That was living in this city. The city. What was interesting about the city is the city used to belong to a family of giants, and in this kind of homebrew world, the giants had been kicked out, scattered, and humanity had taken over. But it was still a giant city architecturally, secrets.
Yeah.
And there had been a war between a group of mages and some gods. Again, I later found out this is actually a very common thing in fiction. So, it sounds like I'm just ripping off everything here, and I do rip things off the books, but that was actually my own idea at the time.
Thing is, man, there's nothing. These ideas that sort of, it's my opinion that these ideas that sort of stick around in like fantasy, like these tropes, they become tropes for a reason. There's something about them that really grabs our imagination.
About them,
So as far as I'm concerned, if something's proven that it's successful, why not rip it off for your home game? If you're running a home game that's like not for publication or anything like that. The real like advantage, as far as I can see, is you can mercilessly like take inspiration and rip off like stuff from anywhere, anything that you
Yeah.
think works.
And yeah, and as the GM side of me, I'd tell any other GMs to do that exactly. Rip off everything you can, but be honest about your sources. Like, don't just obviously claim it's your own.
No, of
It's
course
not.
not.
But yeah, take, learn from the best. But yeah, in that game, I was also trying to learn how to sort of encapsulate themes
Yeah,
and make this more political. This game, because it was more high fantasy the other one. So I was like, it was like the factions within the city, recurring characters, and the mercenary group, which they were like, I had like kind of an internal renown system. So as they were completed jobs, like they earned more renown, and that was really interesting actually because how the players, again, I'm jumping around a bit in terms of like player to GMing side, but like how players relate to what I found was like having a recurring set of characters. They
yeah,
formed stronger relationships with them. So one of the best scenarios in that sort of learning game was when one of those NPCs was in danger,
yeah,
and they just went. They just decided it wasn't planned, but they decided they were going to go and get them. Kind of like Odama from Battlestar Galactica. If you
yeah,
ever see that,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to get my men. They were determined to go after and get this person back. And one of the best sessions in the game was them tracking them down, tracking what, figuring out what had happened and going after them. So that was a real lesson for me. Is recurring characters are an important part of a role playing game, not just D&D, but
No, no,
really good.
I entirely agree with that. I mean, that's something I found
Yeah,
out in the enemy within that I'm running at the minute
yeah.
for Wolfram, because like the first sort of two and a bit books, there's a
Mm-hmm,
lot of
mm-hmm.
travelling around, so you're not really in a single place for a long period of time, where you can
True.
like build up this relationship with NPCs and
Yeah.
whatever. Then for the book run at the minute, they've been in like Middenheim, for like the city of Middenheim for like ages. They've
Yeah.
we had like a player who's like a priest of Ulrich, and Ulrich's like the big religion in Middenheim. They've like saved the city, so like people know them as like the people who saved the city. You know, they've got various positions at court. They know like all these people to speak to, and it's interesting how that's changed the way they are playing it. Because if you know that like you're passing through Generico Fantasy Village, you're on like a riverboat. You're probably never going to come back here again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain amount of like, wow, whatever happens in this village, you know, it doesn't matter because next week we're going to be somewhere else entirely. Whereas when you're actually inhabiting the same space for a certain amount of time, like last session we had a Skaven assassin tried taking out like the player characters, and one of the player characters got poisoned. And when he sort of like when he'd been healed up by the party doctor, the first thing he said is he was like, "Oh shit! What if the assassin's gone after my wife? I'm gonna have to go and like check on my wife." And like stuff like that doesn't happen if you're just like passing through like Generico village.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like you're on tour. You don't really
Yeah,
get to.
very much so.
It's difficult for them to care about what's going on around them. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I look at it in a sort of real world analog is, you know, like when you go on holiday somewhere, wherever it may be, you can go on holiday, you can enjoy where you've gone to. It can all be great. You can soak up the culture, do whatever you want. It can be great, but you know, at the end of that holiday, you're leaving that place.
Yeah.
So your behaviour there, for good or ill, will probably be different than when you get like back to where you live, because you know you've got to live there with whatever your behaviour is like where you live. So
That's where your heart is.
exactly. So we've talked a bit about playing and GMing. So a question I'm going
I
to be
don't.
asked. So go ahead.
I don't think I finished what I was going to say
Oh,
about
go for
the.
it. By all
Just
means.
because you were saying how it ended up transitioning. I don't think I
Yeah,
finished.
yeah.
I was sort of leading into how it transitioned. So I ran that game, and the players really enjoyed the game, even though it was very different to the fourth edition game. And feedback I got is that they preferred the way the characters were designed, and the way they played in that game
Okay.
to their fourth edition characters. Like they felt it was easier to understand. There was a lot less like lots to read, because some of like the things in fourth edition, like the abilities, like were just blocks of text.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them were
Yeah.
simplified and a bit more intuitive, and a lot of the mechanics had been streamlined, such as like the disadvantage and advantage things that fifth edition does.
Yes.
And I found from the GMing side, I kind of agreed with them, especially from running encounters. It seemed to last a lot less. Like in terms of actually session time, they took a lot less time.
Yeah.
But in any game of D&D, once you get up to a certain level, they start taking up a big chunk of the session if you get into
Oh
a
yeah,
fight.
definitely.
But I'd agreed with them that you could get through a lot more in a session in fifth edition. What we found from playing that kind of game. So
Yeah.
so the decision was made together to then convert our original campaign to.
Nice.
And since I've been homebrewing stuff anyway, I was effectively just taking out the rule system and plugging it into the story. So
Yeah.
we got to the end of one of the adventures, and I think it was, yeah. So I think I ran a slightly modified. What was it called? It was one of the deck of many things. Was it Curse on Gardmore Abbey? I'll look this up, John. I've got my I've got the adventures here. Not the snow. It wasn't the Slaying Stone. I think it was the Curse of Gardmore Abbey, which was a fourth edition adventure module. We played that.
Okay.
We finished that. Oh, Madness at Gardmore Abbey. That's what it's called. That adventure involved the deck of many things. Again, a classic thing that I wanted to demonstrate to the players. So that was a fourth edition adventure. I'd modified it a little bit for the campaign we were running, and that's the last one we did as fourth edition characters, and then we switched over.
So presumably at some point you had to go through the process of effectively redoing the characters for the new edition. So
Yeah.
how did you find that in terms of like the ease of doing that? Because obviously the systems are very different.
They are. Some of them were much more easy than others. For instance, we had a barbarian that was pretty straightforward
Yeah.
to transition over into fifth edition. Same with we had a warlock I mentioned. That was pretty simple. Even though the warlock is more interesting, I think in fifth edition, like there's a lot more things you can do with it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Like the theme of the character, because it was a fiend pact, like smoothly kind of went over. The one that was the kind of the hardest was the cleric, because a lot of the abilities the cleric had in fourth edition weren't there. Like a lot of the special abilities, so it kind of was like we had to smooth that over a little bit to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Constantly doing different things. But honestly, it wasn't too bad. But they weren't that. They were still quite low level at that point in terms of like. I think they were around level 7 or 8 by that point. I'll have to check my notes, but yeah. So they were pretty low. So in terms of what you get in fifth edition, you tend to have a smaller set of abilities than you did in fourth. You tend to, because of the way the fourth was made, you had all the encounter abilities, the daily abilities, and the utilities. You kind of had a bigger stack of things you could do.
Yeah. So in terms of GM and playing, would you say that you play more D&D or you GM more D&D?
Honestly, John, it's gone through phases. It has gone through phases. Initially, obviously, I was more of a player than a GM, and then once I started GMing, I don't know if it was the same with you, but like once you get the taste for it, you kind of like you want to do more of it, and you want to try different systems, you want to try different kind of settings, so you kind of get the kind of taste, and you want to run a bunch of games. So it kind of like when I first started GMing the fourth edition, I wanted to GM more games, not just D&D, and I wanted to learn how to be better at it, and I wanted to see how different people approach it, and as I was part of like kind of the online community, like understanding how other people came at it and what their preferred styles, and figuring out what I enjoy and what I'm not like that interested in, or what my strengths and weaknesses are, and what things I can improve on. And that was really a really interesting time in the first forays into figuring out what I enjoy doing, what I didn't enjoy doing, what things that D&D is really good at, and what it's really bad at. So initially I was a player, then I had a big kind of a heavy GMing stint, I'd say, for a couple of years, and it smoothed out to where I was alternating. So obviously I've played with you for many years, John, so I'd have like maybe 2 games where I'm a player a week, as an example, and then 1 game where I'd be GMing.
Yeah, I mean
that weekly game, the heady weekly game we all record.
Yeah. I mean, I think for myself, because obviously I would say talking like sort of pre-mainstream internet days, for me it was just sort of like, oh well, I had the book and I was trying to persuade a few of my friends who were like into the Warhammer Miniatures game to like try the role-playing game. So I ended up as like GM by default, because I was the one who was interested in it and I had the books. And obviously it was long before you could go on Discord and game with people across the globe. So it was like whoever lived in your town, that was your potential pool of players. And then
exactly. That those were the people you were going to be able to game with.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then we had a period where we had like a small group of friends and we sort of alternated like running games. So that was the first time I got to sort of like play a fair few games. And now, obviously, with Discord and most of my games are sort of online now, I've got to the stage where obviously I'm sort of running a game every Friday at the minute, sort of alternating like Wolf games, and obviously we're playing in Johannes's Blades in the Dark game, so it's sort of evened out now. So I get like a nice sort of even experience of like playing and GMing now. But as you were saying nearer the start, obviously, like your jobs change, your workload change, and like free time becomes like a fairly finite resource as you get older and you've got more responsibilities. So I think the sort of the days when I was like living with other tabletop gamers and we were literally, I mean, at one point we were playing like a game of like a World of Darkness game like every night of the week, and then at a weekend we'd just be like all Saturday we'd just be like, right, we're doing nothing but like World of Darkness all Saturday.
Let's get that game going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And long gone are the days when I can sort of do that, because obviously, like, you know, now you've got jobs and responsibilities and whatever. But I do enjoy sort of having the time to like plan my games, and also when I was playing all these games, you got to a certain point where you were like playing in like so many games that it almost sort of overloaded you a little bit. Whereas now, because I'm probably doing less games now, but I'm looking forward to them more.
Yeah, you're not pushing yourself you're burning out a little bit.
Exactly, yeah.
Even though you're enjoying it. Like, I get what you mean. Like, yeah, you're just switching between game systems, and especially when you're playing games where there's a period of time where the online game scene really start kicking off, where you'd be playing with people from different time zones, and the GM would be running it at like 1 a.m. I remember those days, fun times.
Oh yeah, I certainly remember a few times like playing D&D, like 5th edition with like people in America, and it was like 2 in the morning, and like by the end of the session I was just like virtually like falling asleep at my keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I would get a bit too long in the tooth for that sort of thing now.
And I would say, going back to what you said about like the smaller pool of people.
Yeah.
Like, I never had that because I joined later, but I did get kind of an understanding of that from as D&D and tabletop became more known in the public eye, like through different friend groups and places I've worked over the last 10 or so years. Like, people would be like, you know how to run these games, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I know how to run these games. And they'd be like, could you like show us how to play? Could you? And that would be a thing. Like, when she became a known person for this, like, people would come up to you asking you to run games for them.
Oh yeah, I mean we had at one point in the company I worked for, we had like like an external auditors, to assess the various processes you do. And I can't remember what I was wearing, like some vaguely like D&D themed like hoodie or something like that, with like a D20 on it or something like that. And one of the auditors was sat there and chatting to me, and he's like, oh nice, did you play D&D? And I got chatting to him, and he was chatting about some campaign he runs for like some of the people he works with and whatever. And you think, when you're at the point where just like having a D20 on your clothing means that people are like, oh yeah, D&D, I recognise that as like a thing. For someone you've never met before, it's really sort of embedded itself in the public consciousness in a way which I think 10, 20 years ago we would never have expected it to do.
Yeah, out there. And also what I would like to say and touch on is that, because I'm very fortunate, even though I started with 4th edition, I've played a lot of games since then, and I've had the fortune of playing with a lot of great people and GMs, and I really got into going to the conventions, as we've hung out, John, many times now. And one of the things I became aware of is if the hobby wants to grow and you want to bring new people in, you have to be willing to teach, and you have to be willing to give your time over to bring new players in. So whenever someone would ask me to run a game, I'd always be open to trying to teach them and to help them come into the hobby if it's something that they enjoy. Like, not everyone's it's not be for everyone, but I always try to find time, because it was done for me. People have shown me how to play games. I've had the fortune of playing with some really talented GMs such as yourself, and I really treasure those memories and experiences. So I always this is just my personal opinion, I try to give back to the community by helping new people come in, that hopefully will bring new players in and GMs, because we always need more GMs.
Yeah.
And to help sort of help guide them, but not tell them that there is like one true way to do this, to help to also give them that freedom to do it their own way. I always feel it's
Yeah, I mean,
important.
as you know, but for a number of years I did like the games on demand at UK Games Expo,
Mhm.
which bit of a plug for that if anyone's in the UK and going
Yeah,
to it. It's like 2 hour taster games. You
yeah,
basically get a ticket, you rock in there. They'll be like, oh, we've got these 5 GMs. That each of them's got like 5 or so games available. They've got like a 2 hour taster game.
yeah,
You get put at a table. You play a game for 2 hours. It's like low commitment, pre-gen characters
yeah.
normally. Happy days. I did that for a few years. I've not done it for the last 2 years, mainly because of my health and because it is tiring. You know, you,
It's a commitment in time, yeah,
yeah,
as well.
you
Yeah,
pretty much. For saying it's a big convention, you pretty much. I know there's some years where, apart from maybe half an hour to like quickly run around the trade hall, I was just running games or I was asleep.
yeah,
And as we said earlier, I got to the stage where, especially with my health as well, I was starting to sort of like get like really burnt out on it. And like each year, when I was trying to prepare my games, I don't know, it's only 2 hours, so it doesn't have to be like a really detailed game. But I was just like, oh, I've already kind of done like a space like Star Wars heist scenario. I don't really want to do that again. And Hannah, bless her, my wife, would be just like, oh, well, why don't you just take some of the scenarios you've run before? And I was like, well, because I kind of want to do something new because it's a new year and I don't just want to keep reusing that thing. So
you want to challenge yourself, but at the
yeah,
same time, you don't want to make it hard for you.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I've not done it for the last couple of years, but I'm hoping maybe if not this year coming, but like so the year after, to basically just go as like a paying put. Because obviously the benefit of, well, one of the benefits of running all your games is you get your ticket free, you get your hotel free, etc. But it's like a lot of work. But I think, like I say, if not this year coming, maybe the next year, I'll probably go as like a paying punter, and then I can just like turn up if I want and be like, oh, would you want an extra GM to like run
yeah.
the odd game or two? But I'm not like, I don't feel like obligated and locked down to like running like 15 games
You can be like
during
on
the event.
standby.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
be like a
So I know games on demand. Quite often when I was working it, we'd have people who were like, "Oh, I can't run loads of games over the whole thing, but is it all right if I just turn up and run like a random game of fifth edition or whatever?"
Mhm.
And obviously they'd always be like, "Oh yeah, great," because that means one of the other people who's been running loads of games, they can have a bit of a breather. We'll sub in one of it, and I think I'm going to do that sort of more as time goes on, or maybe even look at sort of just booking in like one or two sort of like longer form games, as they do,
yeah.
and sort of do it like that. So I actually have some time to like enjoy the convention. And I'm not saying like running the games on demand wasn't enjoyable, because it was. And like you say, I do think it's
Yeah.
a good thing to try and like give a bit back to the hobby. But
You're just enjoying different things about it at each time
yeah,
you're there.
well, I think, and obviously I know I'm not like an ancient sort of like Methuselah, but as I'm getting older, I am
You and me
sort
both,
of I
brother.
am sort of slowing down a bit. I can't be like, all right, from the crack of dawn to like midnight, I'm going to be running nothing but games now.
You
Like
have to spend your energy
I need
more
my old
wisely.
man naps now. That's what I need.
Yeah, you need to spend your time more wisely. I understand that, man.
And also, I'd like to turn up and like playing some games, because aside from the very first year I went, when like I know me, you, and Hannah played in some games together. Aside from that year, I've not actually played in any games really at the convention, because I've been
Yeah.
too busy running games. If I've played in a game, it's because I've had a bit of time off, and they were like, "Oh, we're a player short for this like taster game.
Yeah.
Can you jump in and fill in?" Which isn't really the same sort of thing.
Oh,
So
it's been something that's outside of the normal hours of the convention, like something that a friend's been
yes,
running,
yeah,
and you're already ready for sleep at that point.
yeah, and I'd like to be able to do that, just to like
Yeah.
turn up, maybe run a couple of games, or like you say, like run something like an off the books game for like a few people, and then just like playing a few games myself. Book into a few games, maybe try out some new systems that like I don't have at home. But yeah, so you mentioned obviously conventions we've just been talking about.
Hmm?
So did you go to a lot of conventions yourself?
When I very first started going to cons, I barely knew anybody from. I didn't really know anyone from the tabletop community in terms of like my local games. I just knew the guys I was learning fourth edition with, and the people from the game that I told you that failed after a
Yeah,
few sessions. And I think we had met at this. We had met. We'd been playing together online, John. I think. I can't remember exactly when the game was, but it was around about that time that I went to my very first con, which was the expo.
yeah,
So I barely knew anyone there. I just kind of turned up on my own and wanted to see what these things were about. This would have been around 20. Now again feels ancient. Yeah, and
Well, I've
that's
got
like it was certainly an eye-opening experience because then this was pre fifth edition,
yeah,
and fourth edition was the game that I knew to bring it in D&D term back to D&D, and that's when I started to learn how controversial this edition was. When I started learning about other
yes.
games and the people who played D&D, encountering more people at the conventions who played from the very beginning of tabletop, effectively.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think the sort of convention experience when it comes to tabletop is very different. I'm not saying it's worse, but it's very different. You know, if you sat around with a group of your friends, like playing a D&D game, and
Yeah,
I would recommend. I know it's not for everybody, but I would recommend that everyone try it at least once, even though it is different, because you do end up, by the very nature of the beast, you end up like playing with different people. You can try different games. You get a wider exposure to different aspects of the hobby.
I think it's really I've had 99% positive experiences. So
Yeah,
I always recommend that people try a convention because it's a great way to learn about a game that you've heard about.
yeah.
It's a great opportunity to meet from a GMing side. It's a great opportunity to chat with other GMs and see how they do things. And it's a great way to learn. It's a great learning opportunity for GMs. Making new friends. Like I said, I've been very fortunate to meet the people over the years there and a bunch of gaming friends and who I still talk to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the one downside to sort of being a bit older and sort of running games even is that even though we've got more sort of ability to role play with more people now, we have like less and less time to actually do
Time.
it in. Because I know that there's quite a lot of people like obviously yourself, like Rob, that I'd love to game with more, but as
And we
always,
should.
get
And we
yeah,
should, John.
we should, yeah, but as always, getting like people's schedules to like sync up is a bit of a nightmare because we're all doing different
Scheduling
jobs.
is
We might be
is
in
the
different time zones. We're all working different hours, different places, different transport arrangements. It can be a bit difficult.
scheduling is the final boss of D&D. It
Oh yeah,
is it
definitely.
is it is the hardest thing to get. I mean, if you get a weekly game going, you're in a good place.
That's like the dream, isn't it? You know,
It is
get that
true.
weekly game going. I've like I say, I've sort of cheated it with my Woofer Up game because I've got like I run a game every Friday, but it's like two different games, like
It
alternating
alternates,
weeks,
yeah.
and that seems to be like a good compromise because like people were like, oh yeah, I can make every other week. Whereas if you say to someone like, oh, can you every Friday can you like set aside 4 or 5 hours of your time for the foreseeable future? I mean, let's face it, it's a big commitment.
It adds up over time.
Yeah.
Like I said, we've managed to get a weekly game going for a number of years now, and yeah, I mean, when you think about it, hundreds of hours played in several campaigns now.
Well, that was it.
Unfortunately, none of them are D&D, so not really in the scope of this D&D discussion, but we have covered quite a lot of time.
Yeah, and
Maybe we should do a fifth edition game at some point.
so you think it's for me, and I'm no fifth edition like hater by any means. I know, like I tend to prefer as a GM like more of sort of like an old school sort of like retro clone or something like that.
Yeah,
But I'm no hater. It's not my preferred edition to run as a GM. But if like someone else who I know is a good GM and they're like, oh, we're going to run a fifth edition game, do you fancy it?
yeah,
I'll play it. Great. I've played fifth edition. I've had fun playing it because I
yeah,
think largely for me now, the sort of role playing experience is more about who you're doing it with, and obviously if you've got like a really crappy game system, that can sort of take the shine off it. But if you've got even an average game system, but you've got like a great group of people you're role playing with, you've got a good GM, that
yeah.
can really sort of like polish and put a shine on like the most basic of systems.
Yeah, because you're working together as well, and it's when you got the right people around you, it feels collaborative and having a good time. Even if there are sessions where again you're finding the game frustrating,
Yeah,
times it's not a problem of D&D, but like if you're finding the game is not doing what you want for you at that time, like if you're with the right group of people, that does take the edge off.
yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but we were talking about obviously like pressures of work and scheduling and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I find for me like one of the most sort of irritating and irksome things about role playing at the minute. And it's not really role playing. It's just the fact that, like I say, the Blades in the Dark game we're doing at the minute with the Johannes is running. Great game. I'm really enjoying our like
Yeah,
group
always
of
love
ne'er
games.
do wells. Yeah, I think Johannes is a great GM. The thing that irks me about games like that is that sometimes, as you know, like you've had a long day at work, you've maybe like struggled to get back in time because of like public transport or whatever. You get back and you've managed to like shove some like food down yourself, and you're like, oh, I've only got like an hour before the game starts. Right, shove some food down myself. I'm absolutely cream crackered after work, and it irks me when I turn up and I feel like I've not really bought my A game to the game.
Yeah.
And I know it's a bit of a ridiculous thing, 'cause, we always put more pressure on ourselves than other people do at the end of the day. But it always irks me when I feel like, oh, I didn't really have like the energy, and I wasn't really like bringing it for that game.
Because even though you love the game and you love playing the people you feel like you're not contributing as much as you like.
Yeah,
I think, like I said, in the span of time, like some sessions you'll have more of that energy than others. So I think it balances out, in terms. I know I've had a few rough patches where I've struggled attendance wise, and I've had things going on that's just made me like turning up like just before the session starts, or I've been delayed
yeah,
getting to the session. So like I know exactly what you mean. Like I feel just like you do, like that you want to always be bringing your best to the game. Because
yeah.
it's other people's time. I want to respect that time, and
Of
I
course.
do keep that in mind. Even if I don't say it during the sessions because we're playing the game, but I always respect people's time and never take it for granted.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned like it being like a collaborative thing at the end of the day. I think at the end of the day, everyone's trying to take part in the game, enjoy each other's company, enjoy the game. Enjoying what like grateful and enjoying like the GMs put time into like creating it. So and I sort of have to remind myself even when I'm like, oh, I don't really feel like I bought my A game tonight because I was a bit too tired. It's been a heavy day at work.
Mm.
That like as long as everyone had fun in the session, including the GM, obviously, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and we all enjoyed each other's company, that's great. Even if it doesn't feel like we did much in the session, as long as we all had fun doing it, like, does it matter at the end of the day?
And that's one of the social aspects of the game that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of the A game and tying it back to what you mentioned before about like in terms of was I more of a player and GM, like what's what I've had the most kind of time spent earlier on is I had two spikes of GMing,
Yeah.
where I really was GMing a lot of games. One was around 2017, and this was maybe between 2017 and 2019 was one of the big spurts of GMing because one of my friends around where I live, they had built a tabletop garage effectively. So
Okay.
they'd gone a little like they had a bit of money and they decided they were going to turn their garage into a tabletop space. So they had surround sound system in there. They had an overhead projector.
Oh, nice.
They had like 3D models printed. They had maps. They had all this kit, but but they didn't really want a GM.
Right. Okay.
So we had a couple of people. So I got invited to play in one of the games someone else was running in that space, and that's how I got involved with this group. And eventually, like my sort of time to GM came up, and I was happy to do it. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity. Here I've got all of this stuff that I wouldn't normally have access to. I'm not really mainly a miniatures guy, or like I have no problems going completely theater of the mind. So like maps
Yeah.
and stuff, I don't see it's a necessity, but they are helpful. So it's like, okay, I have access to all of this stuff that my friend is now generously giving me the opportunity to do for my GM. And so I doubled down in my prep and trying to bring the most out of it. And I ran two games for the same group, well, maybe a play or two changing in and out. One was a Star Wars game using the Fantasy Flight.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had like on the projector, I had like every session had like the Star Wars scroll,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
would have the yellow writing, and it would like talk about the session and what's like a big lead in, and I had the miniatures, the ships, the space maps, and it was great. I was trying to bring my best, and as learning experience because I said, John, we've never had miniatures in any of the games that we've played in together, but this was like me trying to make the most out of this space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a lot. That was a lot of fun. I know Fantasy Flight game has kind of fallen off a little bit in the last few
Yes.
years,
Yeah.
like because of the it's kind of out of scope of this discussion, but like Fantasy Flight, I haven't really supported the game for quite a while now. But that game was fantastic. And then, as I know you mentioned it before, it was when my Eberron game started. The first time I GM'd Eberron was in that space. And again, I really wanted to bring my A game because I wanted to We had a mixture with a split of new players and old.
Okay.
So I wanted to have stuff for both. So I wanted to really use Eberron as a way to showcase the strength of tabletop games and D&D, show it at its best, but also give something for the veteran players to make interesting spins on things, like subvert expectations a little bit, to try and give them something fresh. And like one of the best compliments I had for that game was one of the older players that said that like he loved coming to each session because I would bring something new to the game that he'd never seen. And even when I subverted the tropes of D&D, it was never done in a way to punish the players. It was always something new that Eberron, the setting, I'd used to sort of bring out,
Yeah.
and put it on show. So what, for example, John, the most first sessions in D&D start at like a tavern, or like with like in a village, or it's a
Yes.
very low key affair because they're low level players. They're not famous. They're not particularly powerful in terms of the universe, right? But I was like, nope, none of that. Where everyone's noir. It's high fantasy. It's intrigue. It's like bold moves. So I went for the hot, start to a campaign, and the first session, them in the middle of a fight on an airship that was crashing into a forest.
Nice.
That was like session
You
one.
know me, I love
That
an
was
airship
like
crash, man.
that was like I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, and like
Yeah.
Japanese. So it was like I'm straight away. Like we're going full speed, and it was for the new players. They were like panicking, like what, like, oh my God, what the hell? And for the veteran players, they were like, well, this is a lot. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
this is session one. Um, but yeah, it was a hot start, and there was, because most first sessions are quite light,
Yeah.
but I went, okay, I'm gonna pack a lot into this, like, first session. So like as the campaign went on, they started learning things about what was going on in that first session, like why, because they were attacked effectively in the initial, like, as the kind of inciting incident of the game. They were attacked and the airship was crashing. They're like, why were they attacked? And like the people on that airship, like the manifest who they were and what they were doing and why they were on that ship, like that echoed through the game. So they learnt more and more context about what the situation was and why everything had kicked off and what they were caught up in over time. So rather than the first session not being significant, it was very important for them, and the things that they remembered about it and things that they wrote down, like that really over time paid off. So anyone who really actually paid attention, like, I made sure to reward that as things went on, because they were able to then connect the dots, because there was a very big espionage portion of the game. And I can talk more about the Ebro, so I don't want everyone to
No,
dominate the
that's fine. Feel free to talk
podcast,
about Eberron. I mean, I've been known to start a game with an airship crash myself from time to
yeah,
time.
it was great. It was great. It was, and so the veteran players really enjoyed it, because it was like, okay, this is exciting. This is not boring. We're doing stuff here. Like, these are big swings we're making here, and again, that set a tone for the rest of the game. Like, things. This is not going to be your standard game.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen, and I carried that on.
I tell you what, I've always fancied, like for like an Eberron game, like sort of like you said, like a hot sort of start straight away.
Yeah.
Obviously, for those of you, I know you all know this, Matthew, but for people who aren't familiar with Eberron, there's a sort of certain level of like magitech in Eberron. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah. It's like, again, I don't know how people listening to this, like, I don't know their experience or everyone, but yeah, there's like a level of magic that's quite common. So that's like everyday magic. So, but the kind of like the real dangerous stuff, that's harder to find. So it's like kind of it's almost like two tier. There's like the basic stuff everywhere, yeah, pretty common, but like the real juicy stuff, you do still have to go find that.
And one of the elements I always sort of like loved when I picked up like the third edition books was they have, I don't know, because I know you'll know this, Matthew, but they have a thing called the lightning rail, where it's like a high speed train with like bound sort of elemental like rings that sort of speed the train along. And I've always fancied like starting a game where basically the players are like passengers on a train, and then there's like some like mad train heist that goes on. So like literally the game starts with like the people trying to like rob the train and like derail the train, and sort of just like throw the player characters into that and let's see what they do.
Yeah, see how they react.
Yeah.
I'm down, John.
Hey, like I say, if we could
In the future,
if we could get a schedules to sync up, I'd do it in a hot second, man.
yeah.
But yeah, so you mentioned like your prep earlier on for GMing. I know there's various like levels of prep. Like I quite enjoy what me and Johannes referred to as like the quiet fun of the hobby, where you sat down, you're making your notes and whatever. In terms of prep, like how much prep would you say you do when you're going to like GM a session?
You know, it's evolved over time. I definitely in the beginning try to over prep. Like I try to think about everything the players might do and have like something in mind of like how I deal with it or how what would happen. Like almost like a video game. You know, it's
Yeah,
reactive. Like I'm thinking in a reactive sense. So like if the player does this, I will do this. I will present this problem. And I definitely tried to think. I was very much focused on building balanced encounters and like not being too punishing. But it's evolved over time, whereas I'm usually thinking short, medium, and long term.
okay,
So like I have an idea of where the game's going, like in terms of like the major players, antagonists, themes. Like I have an idea of what they are and where the game's going, and what the end point is probably going to look like. But I'm not hard sold on it because again, part of the game is it's going to change.
of course,
Like
yeah,
this is just to give me a like a sort of like a scope and a vision, and to sort of like I like to push the themes of the game I like to keep those consistent because I think consistency and authenticity in a game that's one of the best sort of juicy parts of the story side of it. You can keep those and keep people engaged. Like that, those things are rewarded over time. So in the short term, it's like for the next session, what are the players doing? What do I need for that session?
yes,
What's the situation? Who's involved? And that's the kind of thing I'd prep, and I'd have like a couple of encounters for for the big sort of three things that I think could happen. But again, I don't panic over if they do something completely different or left field, because what I would do sort of in between sessions, I'd have a couple of things that I can pull from if I need to, like a couple of like if I want to throw in a surprise or something unexpected, I prep those over time, but they're ready to be like picked up and put in anytime I want. Does that make
so
sense?
they're sort of like optional things that you can drop in when and if you need them.
Yeah, that's me sort of learning from like taking inspiration from things I like and using the material to how I want to run the game. So having those prepped for those kind of those kind of moments, like an assassination squad or like an interesting night if you're playing a fantasy game that has a quest that they're involved in. Like that's kind of like a subplot you can throw in as an example. And for medium term plans, these are sort of like okay, because I like to think of the story in sort of arcs. Okay, so where's this kind of story arc going to stop and when the new one going to begin? How can I tie that in to the players' backgrounds if they provide any and the themes of the game and sort of indicate looming threats? Because what I like to do, I like to foreshadow things.
Yeah.
I like things that are going on that don't seem important. And the players can ignore them. Like again, I'm not going to punish them for ignoring them, but if they're paying attention to those things will come back around later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I like doing in games where I'll have like stuff that's going on. So, just to use a ridiculously like stereotypical example, oh, there's like an orc chief who's trying to like raise up an orc warband to attack a
Mm-hmm.
city or whatever, and they might hear rumours about that, and there's no impetus for them to particularly get involved if they don't want to be. But once that has been established, like that
Yeah.
thing is going on in the background. So if the player characters don't get involved, I roughly know what's going to happen if they don't do anything. So as the game goes on, if they don't get involved, they might start coming across like, oh, we've come across these few villages that have been destroyed by the orcs because no one stopped him. He's got his orc horde together, so it's not like punishing them specifically, but it feels like it creates that illusion of there is stuff going on in the background, whether you're
Yeah.
involved with it or not.
It makes the world feel more alive. It makes it feel like there's other interested parties that are doing their own thing in parallel to your own. It doesn't take
Yeah.
anything from the game, like to put those in there. I only adds to it, I think.
Okay, so we've been chatting for a while. So I'm also going to ask, in terms of the prep, I know there's like a plethora of sort of online tools and things like that, and offline tools now.
Uh-huh.
In terms of your prep, how do you actually like store your prep? Just have it written down in a notebook? Do you put it in a Word document? Or what do you do?
So I have a couple of things I do. I use my Google Drive,
Yeah.
which is where I store a lot of my kind of archive notes. So what I'll have is like during the session, I'll have like an A4 piece of paper. This is where I write things that I've either introduced that I didn't plan to, through the player's choices and actions. It'll be interesting things they might have uncovered or NPCs. Because one of the things I prep ahead of time, or I try to for my good GM mode, is I'll have like a list of example NPC names and things that I can
Yeah.
draw from. A lot of people do this in a pinch because getting a good name take a bit of practice. And then I'll just mark that name as used,
Yeah.
and then what I'll do after the session is I write it up on my Google Doc, and I categorize it by session, and I'll write things I've introduced. Um, Anything that I want to carry forward into the following sessions that's going to be ongoing. Um, and I have like another document that I maintain for longer campaigns where I have like an NPC kind of master list
Yeah. Yeah.
where I write things about those NPCs, important things, sometimes secret things that the players don't know about them, um, or like I said villains that have been operating in the story that they don't know about, and getting ready to bring them in. But I know that my prep's kind of very medium scale to some. I know some people like are very much more detailed. They do like they have like notarized recordings like
Yeah.
when they do online. Like I don't really do any of that, but I do maintain like a sort of campaign sort of thing. And I've got a lot of them to the left of me here from this our session where I have my notepad as well, which is where I write down things about when we're in a combat. I'll write down things that might be relevant later.
Oh yeah, I mean, even though I sort of store most of my stuff in like Obsidian Notes, I've always got like a notepad sat there during the session. So if like
Yeah,
some random thing happens and I'm like, right, I want to remember that, I can just quickly
yeah.
scribble it down and answer the
Yeah,
check
so
it
I have an
afterwards.
A4 for like the session, but I have a notepad which when I'm running a combat, if I'm not doing it online, like I use the notepad to do like track stuff like, and I write notes in there in terms of the combat. If something like like they steal something off one of the enemies, or one of them gets away, that kind of stuff, and then I'll eventually go onto the main sort of notepad as well.
Okay, so one of the last questions that I'm trying to ask everyone we do these interviews with is
Hmm.
if you had a magic wand and you could conjure up the perfect version of D&D for you in particular, what would that version of D&D look like? What would be different? What would be the same compared to like the versions that you play at the moment?
And that's a big question. Perfect. No restrictions. Time, money,
Now,
mission.
like I say, it's you've got the magic wand. You just have to think it. You can summon up
Mhm.
the perfect version for you as either a GM or a player, your choice. What would and obviously you don't have to get into specific systems, but what would that version of D&D look like? What would Matthew's perfect version of D&D look like?
You know what? It would. The rule set doesn't necessarily matter for the game, in a sense, as long as you're having a great time,
Of
people.
course.
But I say for me, with I'd probably go with fifth edition 2014 version. So that's the one that I think is the most comfortable with, and
Yeah.
that I think I'd be able to navigate best at this point in time. No slight on the newest version, just don't have the experience with it to make that kind of call for me. I think from I mentioned before of my friends having his sort of converted garage. I think I would for me the perfect game would be something similar to that in the sense that it would be a group of friends that come together, sit around a table together, and play the game, but with a bit of spectacle. I think having the
Yeah.
miniatures, the
Yeah.
maps, the music, like that adds to the game when combined. As long as you have the players who are engaged in it and they're interested in it, I think that to me that would be the perfect game. Like a weekly game, getting together, everyone's excited to play, everyone has that buy-in, they're putting their A game, as we mentioned before, into it. And possibly, I think at this point in time, if I picked a setting, if we're keeping it strictly D&D, I think it would be Eberron would be the choice because again I've gushed about it already. That's the thing I've been able to bring out the best stories with people I've played with in Eberron, so I think that would be my choice. I'm opened up to say in the future I might encounter something else, but as of right now, that would be my perfect game. And hopefully it would run for a couple of years, and then
Yeah,
it would. The key thing I think for the perfect game is it has to end with a satisfying conclusion for
yeah,
everyone.
I agree.
Because most games start strong, but landing that conclusion and having that game which stays with people over the years, really, I think that's the key for the perfect game.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the, 'cause I agree with you about the satisfying conclusion. And one of the things that, well, we're talking about lifting inspiration from other places. One of the things I saw, I can't remember who it was, I saw it on like some sort of blog or something, where they were saying what they do in their game is when they like wrap up a campaign, they they do like a thing where they go to their players and they're like, oh, so give us like a sort of brief description of like what happened to your like character sort of like a year after the events of the game. And
Or like
obviously, yeah, like
an
an epilogue.
epilogue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
obviously,
that's
like
cool.
you don't really have to censor it because like the game's done, so they're not going to do anything to like ruin it, and it just gives the players a nice way of sort of not as like a happy ending, but sort of giving like a nice sort of satisfying conclusion to their sort of characters,
Yeah.
and they can sort of freestyle it a bit, and that's something I've definitely lifted for games I run where I'll be like, oh, so did describe how your character sort of like retires or what they're doing with their life after the events of the campaign, and it's just a nice little sort of bookend to the campaign.
Yeah. See how they move on from the events of what happened in the game.
Okay.
And that's one of the frustrating things about tabletop games, is when you have a game that you really enjoy, either as a player or as a GM, and you're enjoying the people, you're enjoying the setting, you're enjoying the story, and then for whatever reason the game stops, breaks apart,
it just
it
fizzles
ends
out.
because you want to reach that conclusion, and you want to hit that, you want to have a nice clean ending, and sometimes you never get that, because again for the Eberron game I've been talking about, I had to put it on pause, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and I still love to finish it because there was so much in that game that we all loved
Yeah.
that it feels like there's something there that still needs to be done. The
Yeah.
game's
Yeah.
not, even though we've had to stop for real life reasons, like the game's not over. Like the story there needs to continue at
Yeah. I
some
mean,
point.
I think one of the best pieces of GM advice I've ever been given. Again, I forget who gave it to me, but it was someone saying, if you've got a good idea, don't save it for later on in the campaign. Like use it
Yeah.
as soon as you can because, as you've said, real life things going on, scheduling, etc. You never
Mm.
know how long your game's gonna last, and it's a real shame if you're like, oh, I've got this great idea, I'm gonna save it for later on in the campaign, and then like you never get to that later on. And you're like, oh, we never got to do that cool thing I thought of. So I've always sort of tried to go with that. Like if there's an idea I've got, where I'm like, oh, this would be a cool idea. Try and sort of bring it around or use it as sort of as quickly as you can in the game, so it actually gets used.
And you get to see it. I
And
absolutely agree. It's a great piece of advice, John. That's yeah, you should put all your best ideas out,
yeah,
and if it turns out they're not as good as you thought they were, then you learn from it, and then something else will
exactly, yeah.
inspire you later down the line.
Okay, so last of all, then, if someone came up to you and was saying that they're thinking of getting into like D&D or they wanted to get into D&D, what would your advice be to them?
As a GM or a player, like are they?
Your choice.
Yeah, well, I first thing first thing I'd do is reassure them that whatever if whatever your ability at the game is, you think it is, don't relax because there's no barrier for entry really. Like the game's open to anyone who wants to try it. Community is largely welcoming. You should absolutely do it. You
Brilliant.
should absolutely do it.
So
If it,
so go ahead.
I was gonna say if someone's asking you to run a game, my advice would be slightly different.
Yeah.
Not negative, but like it would be different in the sense that the important things are to make sure everyone's having fun at the table, to let the rules help you make the game run the way you want it to, but don't sweat it if you need to change things on the fly. Like it's not
Yeah.
meant to restrict you; it's meant to support you. And if it was D&D specific advice we were giving, I'd be like, the game is going to give you a lot of help for running combat and for the mechanics, but in terms of the puzzle side, the exploration side, the story side, that is gonna some of that you're gonna have to bring in from yourself and other things because, again, like I said, it supports you. It's weighted in more one direction, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think for myself, as someone who like probably GMs more still than they play, I think the sort of advice I've given to most GMs would be like, you know, if you think a session's not gone 100% as well as you thought it was going to do, don't beat yourself up unnecessarily about it. Don't expect, and I've done this myself. Don't expect yourself to be like running perfect games when you first go in, because I think as GMs we're largely like our own harshest critics, because we can run a game, the players can have had a great time, everyone can enjoy it, and we come away going, oh yeah, but I don't feel like I did it as well as I could have done. And it's like, well, as long as you had fun while you were running it and the players all had fun, that's all anyone can ask for, you know. So that's the advice I most often give to GMs, like, you know, don't beat yourself up too much about it if the session's not perfect, because sessions are rarely 100% perfect, you know, because we're all just like human beings trying to run a game.
Exactly. I also think my own ethos is never punish the players for my own mistakes. So if I've done something and I know I've done something that's going to negatively impact the game, I misread a rule, like I took the game in a direction that they didn't want to go in, but I felt like the game needed it, like, and I realized I shouldn't have done that. Like, very open and upfront about it. Have an adult conversation about it and be like, okay, here's what I think. Here's how we should move forward together. Don't feel like I have to like force something onto the players.
And I think as a GM, it's like it's very rare you'll make a mistake that's so horrendous that like it can't just be sorted out by having like a quick conversation with the players and going like, oh look, my bad, I made this mistake. How do you think we should? I'm thinking this is how we should sort it out, or how do you think this is how we should sort it out? And I think if you're honest with your players, as you were saying, then most of the time they're fine with it, because we all know that like everyone's just trying to do their best, really, aren't they? Like no one's perfect.
And sometimes people will interpret things differently to how you meant them.
Of course,
it's always about communication. So that's one of the advice is always try to have open and clear communication with each other and be willing to talk about things, even if it seems confrontational. Like, it's better to be open about any issues you have than let them definitely. That's when problems can happen.
Okay, well, Matthew, thank you very much for talking to us in this episode. Pleasure to chat to you as
anytime,
always.
John. Anytime.
Is there anything that you would like to plug, or any sort of shout outs you'd like to give at this point?
I say anyone who's thinking of getting into D&D, you should definitely give it a try. Hobby can always use more players, and we could always use more GMs. Never feel like the way that you view the game is wrong. People may tell you that, because from experience and how I came in, like the opinions about D&D and other tabletop games very varied. There isn't one true narrative.
Yeah, and I think inevitably whenever you get into any hobby where like people are sort of very passionate about it, as people are about tabletop RPGs, that people get very passionate about their version. And again, that's partly why I wanted to have all these conversations with different people, because we've all got our own version of D&D effectively, which is how we prefer to run it, how we prefer to play it, whatever. And same with other role-playing games. And it's very easy to get very passionate about your version of the game to like the exclusion of other stuff. And like I said, when we're talking about 5th edition, I'm not really a fan of running it as a GM. It's just not like my particular vibe. But by the same token, I'm not going to say like, oh, it's a terrible game, because I don't really enjoy GMing it. And likewise, like I say, if someone else was going to run it, I'd still jump in as a player. I'm happy with that.
And you've had fun playing in it, so exactly, you can't say it's not doing it for you on the other aspects. Yeah. I mean, I don't really need to plug at this point in time, but again, I just say thank you, John, for taking the time tonight, and thank you to all the GMs out there, including Johannes, who have run games for me in the past. Always appreciated.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much. We'll stop the recording here.